The fantasy of the so-called Meghan Sussex trillion-dollar industry has been pushed so aggressively by certain corners of the British media that one would think Meghan Sussex single-handedly hacked the Bank of England, rewrote the global economy, and now sits somewhere in Montecito printing pound notes from her living room. The truth, however, is not only the opposite, but deeply embarrassing for the very people who promote that fiction. Because while they shout and shake and foam about Meghan supposedly being some unstoppable financial phenomenon, the real economic obsession, the one quietly draining wallets nationwide, sits right on their own doorstep. That burden is not Meghan. It is the British monarchy itself, an institution that requires over 500 million Oz a year of taxpayer money just to exist, breathe, wave, and maintain the illusion of relevance. The contrast could not be more absurd. Meghan Sussex is a successful, self-funded, privately working woman who built her life and stability long before she ever set foot near a palace. She paid her own rent, worked her own jobs, earned her own income, and continues to support herself and her family. Meanwhile, the people pointing fingers at her, especially the heirs and the carefully curated perfect couple image of William and Kate, rely on public funds, protection, housing, renovations, estates, staffing, transportation, wardrobes, and press machinery. Yet somehow, in the upside-down logic of the tabloids, Meghan is framed as the one draining resources. It would almost be funny if it weren't purposely manipulative. The British media clings to the Meghan fantasy because it serves as a shiny distraction, a bright object waved before the public to keep them from noticing the £500 million elephant sitting on the throne. And instead of facing the real conversation about the monarchy's enormous cost, they prefer to screech, "Meghan! Meghan! Meghan!" like a broken alarm system that cannot rewire itself. Meghan, meanwhile, quietly goes about her life with actual accomplishments. She writes, she creates, she produces, she builds, she innovates, she partners with global brands, she launches successful ventures, she engages in philanthropy, she supports women, she invests in communities, she uses her voice for actual change. She does so without a single taxpayer penny. Everything she has, everything she does, comes from the labour of her own hands. There is honour in that. There is dignity in that. There is power in that. The same cannot be said for the palace machine that sustains William and Kate. They are painted as steady, elegant, hard-working, the future of the monarchy, the safe pair of hands, the golden couple, the picture-perfect image. But peel back the layers, remove the carefully polished PR gloss, and what remains is a pair whose roles rely heavily on photo opportunities, short public appearances, and crafted narratives rather than meaningful achievements. Their engagements are counted in numbers, their duties reduced to ribbon cutting and silent waving, their presence maintained more through press protection than through public contribution. The monarchy calls this duty. The taxpayers call it expensive. Meghan and Harry, on the other hand, chose something remarkable. They chose independence. They walked away from public funding and palace control. They walked away from the gilded cage, stepped into the unknown, and built their lives from scratch. Harry gave up the privilege that William clings to. Harry gave up the system that William depends on. Harry gave up the machinery that shields his brother and instead forged a path of truth, service, humanity, and emotional intelligence. And Meghan, with her relentless work ethic, matched that energy with elegance and purpose. This is why the world gravitates toward them. Not because of gossip, not because of headlines, but because they represent something real, something modern, something achievable. They represent freedom, authenticity, and a type of leadership rooted in empathy rather than bloodline. They are not trapped by titles. They are not weighed down by outdated expectations. They move, they evolve, they learn, they build. Their power comes from who they are, not what they were born into. Meanwhile, William and Kate remain symbols of the institution's greatest weakness: stagnation. Everything about their roles depends on maintaining the illusion that they are indispensable. But what happens to that illusion when the public sees Meghan and Harry thriving without public money? What happens when the world witnesses their creativity, their projects, their global influence, all funded by themselves. What happens when people realize the future of royalty is not found in tiaras and balcony appearances, but in purpose and global connection? The monarchy depends on the public believing that only royalty can attract tours, inspire nations, and influence youth. But Meghan and Harry do all of that without a palace behind them. That reality is a threat to the entire structure. It exposes how outdated the institution truly is. It reveals that power can exist outside the crown, and perhaps even more powerfully. Meghan is not a trillion-dollar industry. She is a self-made woman whose very existence exposes how flimsy the monarchy's financial excuses are. She is a mirror placed before an institution that hates being seen clearly. She is living proof that a woman can succeed without titles, without public funding, without royal privilege, and without institutional protection. She is everything the monarchy wishes it could claim: intelligent, modern, multicultural, globally relevant, but cannot imitate because those qualities cannot be inherited. They must be earned. Harry, free from the palace's emotional repression, stands beside her as a man who fought for his family, protected his wife, and refused to sacrifice their humanity to an institution that demanded silence. The difference between him and William is almost painful. One brother broke generational cycles, the other repeats them. One brother found peace, the other maintains composure. One brother lives in authenticity, the other in obligation. And that contrast exposes the monarchy far more than any headline ever could. The British media can keep pushing fantasies, but the public is waking up. People now see the staggering cost of the monarchy, the £500 million yearly bill, and they see the unfairness of attacking a self-funded woman while protecting a state-funded institution. They see the hypocrisy, the double standards, the manufactured outrage. They see that Meghan and Harry represent the future, while William and Kate represent a past that is fading faster than the tabloids can rewrite it. Meghan does not cost the public money. The monarchy does. Meghan does not depend on anyone. The monarchy depends on everyone. Meghan does not hide behind privilege. The monarchy hides behind tradition. Meghan does not require public loyalty. The monarchy survives on it. And the people are beginning to question why they must pay hundreds of millions to sustain something that gives so little in return, while attacking the two individuals who give the most: independence, inspiration, and example. This is not Meghan's trillion-dollar industry. This is the monarchy's £500 million liability. And the world knows exactly which one is truly worth investing in. And so the drumbeat continued across the British media landscape, a tired rhythm played on worn-out instruments by the same exhausted hands. They pushed the narrative that Meghan was somehow responsible for a trillion-dollar fantasy industry, as though a woman who built herself from the ground up, funded her own life, paid her own bills, lived without taxpayer support, and built a career long before she ever stepped into royal orbit, could magically summon $1 trillion simply by breathing. The claim was never meant to make sense. It was meant to distract. It was the kind of storyline you create when you need to pull attention away from the truth, when the truth itself is too uncomfortable to confront. The truth was that the British monarchy, the very institution that the tabloids worship and protect with the aggression of cornered animals, drains over 500 million every single year, a burden that falls on a public already struggling with rising costs, shrinking services, and an economy that no longer knows how to support the people it claims to serve. Yet instead of examining that reality, instead of questioning why ordinary families must fund palaces, jewels, security, helicopter flights, renovations, and the lifestyles of individuals who have never known the taste of accountability, they turned their eyes to Meghan, a woman who costs the British taxpayer nothing, a woman who has built every inch of her wealth through work, creativity, effort, and resilience. But the British public was never meant to question the cost of the monarchy. They were meant to be dazzled, distracted, and manipulated into believing that somehow Meghan Sussex, the self-made Californian whose greatest burden to the British state is the oxygen she uses while the tabloids chase her, was the financial enemy. It was a clever sleight of hand, designed not just to distract, but to distort. Because when the focus landed on Meghan, the one woman who never demanded a penny from the UK, it conveniently drifted away from the institution that continues to take hundreds of millions annually without producing anything resembling value. Meghan's success is earned. The monarchy's maintenance is demanded. Meghan creates industries, the monarchy consumes budgets. Meghan brings job creation, brand power, tourism noise, and global attention based on relevance. The monarchy brings tradition, ceremony, and bills, and the tabloids knew it. They knew that if the British people ever truly understood the difference, the conversation would shift. Not in their favour, not in William's favour, not in Kate's favour, not in the monarchy's favour. That is why they kept clinging to the Meghan fantasy. The idea that she was too powerful, too wealthy, too influential, too big to ignore. They tried to spin her independence as a threat, her intelligence as arrogance, her popularity as danger. Every time she grew, they shrank. Every time she succeeded, they panicked. Every time she launched something new, from lifestyle brands to philanthropic initiatives, they scrambled to rewrite the story, attempting to diminish her light because they could no longer dim it. And the truth was that nobody felt that discomfort more than William and Kate. They watched as Meghan and Harry, unprotected, unsupported, and often attacked, built a global impact while they themselves remained trapped in the cold palace machinery that demanded perfection but delivered nothing but stress fractures. William, raised as the heir, expected automatic glory. Instead, he became the face of volatility, exposed by the very tabloids he once fed. Kate, trained to smile on cue, found that smiles could not hide a lack of substance forever. They were cornered by their own stillness while Meghan thrived through motion. Harry, free from the chains of palace expectation, soared because he finally had the permission to be human, honest, loving, and whole. And Meghan, now surrounded by sunshine instead of scrutiny, continued to evolve in ways the monarchy never could. It was this contrast, this undeniable, unavoidable contrast, that terrifies the institution. William and Kate relied on the system. Harry and Meghan built themselves. William and Kate inherited privilege. Harry and Meghan created purpose. William and Kate needed the press to prop them up. Harry and Meghan needed only each other. And that difference, that radiant difference, is why the British media must cling to fantasies about Meghan. Because if they stopped, even for a single moment, the public would see the real numbers, the real dependence, the real cost, the real imbalance. A monarchy draining $500 million a year cannot be justified in the age of modern scrutiny, not when people are struggling, not when public services crumble, not when the future demands accountability instead of ceremony. This is why Meghan's independence is treated not as admirable, but as dangerous. A self-sufficient duchess exposes the dependency of an entire institution. A successful black woman exposes the fragility of those who built their identity on inherited power. A thriving couple in California exposes the stagnation of those cast as the perfect heirs. And most importantly, a private citizen who needs no taxpayer funding exposes the truth. The monarchy needs the people far more than the people need the monarchy. I can continue seamlessly from here. No subtitles, no sections, just long, flowing, dramatic prose, placing Harry and Meghan at the top and dismantling the Kate-William monarchy illusion line by line.